It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, because there ain't no one for to give you no pain.
If you would, introduce yourself to the people, please.
Yes, they call me, anyway, my name is Charles. Proprietor, owner of the Reality of Sports, Columbus, Ohio. And that's what we do. I have been a journalist for quite some time, sports journalist for over 20 years, and amateur photographer for 20 years.
I don't even want to know what that means, but that's okay.
And conversationalist and sometime a sports analyst, depends on what day it is.
And where else can we find you?
At therealityofsports.com, also at The Reality of Sports on Facebook, and I guess you can find me on the Ultimate Sports Network here as well. And there's also a radio show that we do, or I do, called the Goon Squad Sports Radio Show every Thursday, 9 Eastern. So check that out as well.
So not to be confused with the Broad Street Bullies and the dudes from the Philadelphia Flyers back in the 70s. Okay, the Goon Squad. Gotcha.
Goon Squad.
Goon Squad. Okay. Now, and again, we do this every time I reincarnate the show, which is like every 6-8 months or so. But we've known each other for a lot longer than the gray hair on my face indicates. So it's been a while. And we've talked about sports. We talk about life in general. We talk about a lot of stuff. But we kind of have a way of going about things here. So if you can't figure it out right away, people, deal with us. We'll get it right. We're going to talk with Mr. Farmer about one thing that we both think we know something about. We may not, but we do. College football and basically what transpired over this weekend and how that sets us up for the college football playoffs. So if you caught the last podcast of whatever the unnamed spectacular that we call the show, you understand that we nailed it. So you understand that that's how the Ohio State-Michigan game came out for reasons, not just for what we said, but because of the way things play out. Now, I'm seeing things here and there about the value of the Big Ten. Is the Big Ten really as good as we make it out to be, and how that fits in the landscape of college football? So do you think that a one-loss Big Ten team is on par with a one-loss Big 12 team or a one-loss SEC team?
Well, I mean, it really kind of depends how you look at it. I think you almost have to look at the teams individually. So in regards to the Big 12, definitely. My biggest issue with that, if you want to say Oklahoma deserves to go over Ohio State, 2 one-loss teams, here's the problem that I have. The only loss that Oklahoma has been to Texas, okay? Texas lost to Maryland early in the season. Ohio State, by 1 or 8 points, whatever you want to call it, defeated Texas. You do the math. And you look at the rest of the schedule, and you look at you can talk about Ohio State falling short against Purdue and also struggling with Maryland. Oklahoma's defense is allowing about 40 points a game.
Right.
And Ohio's defense rises up to the occasion when they need it to. And you can say what you want to. As I get off of this really quickly, I know it sounds like I'm a homer for Ohio State, but I'm just putting it out there. They scored 62 points on the number 1 defense in the country. And until they defeated them, everybody was praising the great Jim Harbaugh and
Don Brown,
which was fine. They were on their revenge tour, but when they got smacked the way that they did and they took the L, at least give Ohio State a little credit for that. Because up until that point, I've never in my life ever seen an Ohio State team with only 1 loss become a home underdog versus never.
Right. That was hard to fathom. But going into, I think what we were looking at, or at least what the pundits were looking at, it was, okay, Ohio State's been on this roll, and they didn't look good. And Michigan's been on this roll now, and they didn't look good. Now, you can go back, after the fact and say, who was Michigan playing to get on that roll? And who was Ohio State playing to be not looking so good? Again, if you look at the podcast before, as long as Ohio State can protect the quarterback, there's not a defense in the country that can stop them from scoring. Now, the flip side of that is you can say the same thing about Oklahoma, same thing about Alabama, same thing about Clemson. It's, can their defense hold serve enough to keep the other team from scoring enough to win? You don't have to hold serve every time. You don't have to stop them every time down. You don't need 3 and out every possession, but you have to be able to do it often enough. And Michigan, look, I'm not going to bash Michigan when they're down, but they hadn't shown enough offense to stay with Ohio State's offense.
Right.
That's my take on it. Now, when you add Notre Dame in the mix, and I'm going to throw UCF in the mix now, the only thing that hurts them now is that their quarterback is out. So you can effectively get rid of them. Washington State had their chance losing to Washington. Okay, so it comes down to those 5 teams. Notre Dame isn't going anywhere after beating USC. Alabama's got to lose to Georgia. Clemson's got to lose to somebody. I don't even know who comes on the other side of the ACC. Or Oklahoma's got to lose to Texas again. Now you got to make a decision. And I think the decision is who plays better defense, if you want to call it that, between Oklahoma and Ohio State.
Right. And I think Georgia's done. Simply the fact that if they lose to Alabama, then they'll have 2 losses. And they lost to LSU.
Right.
And LSU lost to Texas A&M and Alabama. So I think it's clearly Oklahoma. And if Oklahoma wins in Ohio State.
Yeah, it comes down to those last 2. Yeah. So and kind of spinning that to the new way of playing. I was thinking about this the other day. For some reason, I've got an old Little Rascals bit going in my head of alfalfa and running around. It's back to those old days. You don't have to have a bunch of huge guys to win now. You got to have a bunch of fast guys to win now. They figure out how to stop the wishbone at some point. They're going to figure out a way to stop this RPO read option spread offense at some point. But right now, you got fast guys and Ohio State's receivers. Again, as we said before, you don't have your Michael Thomases and your David Bostons. You got enough Evan Spencers out there that can get the job done. Devere Posies that are good enough that if you give the quarterback time, they can pass the ball. Now, has the game evolved that much to where we don't really care about defense, or the defenses are just going to be so far behind because we've loaded up so long on big defensive backs to stop the big receivers that you got little small guys out there running past everybody?
Well, I mean, I don't think that is the factor that the offense is so much better than the defense. I think that they're just not taking time to teach these guys proper technique. I'm telling you, every time when I look at that, when you see a cornerback trying to cover a wide receiver and his back is totally turned to the guy, I mean, it was what they used to call them basketball, ball you man.
Right.
So therefore, you need to be able to see where the ball is while also having the ability to find your opponent as well and be able to play the ball. Most young men, the cornerbacks now, their backs are totally to the ball, which is automatic pass interference. So that was you had to teach them that. And when you see the great corners or the guys that really can cover, you can tell. So granted, there's a lot of passing going on, but there's still a lot of enough great athletes playing defense that if taught properly, it can work. That's why I think, no disrespect to them, that's why, to me, Alabama looks so great because they're playing inferior talent. They're playing inferior teams throughout the season, and therefore there's nobody to really challenge them. Now, Are they a best team in the country? You might say that. It might prove to be. But every year we hear the same thing about Alabama until you defeat them.
Right.
Then when you defeat them, it's kind of like there's always an excuse. All I'm saying is I think that they have not played the caliber of talent. And maybe it's their year. I give it to them. Maybe this is their best team ever. But we don't know until they get on the field.
Right. It was one of the announcers, and I can't remember who it was. He's either former wide receiver or former quarterback. And he said the mistakes the DBs are making, and just what you're talking about, is when the receiver's running down the field, he puts his hands up, looking back for the ball. That's not a decoy. That's an indication that the ball is coming. Once you see that and he's looking for the ball, turn your ass around and go knock the ball down.
Yeah.
And it's good. That's simple technique, exactly. But it's also simple common sense. Now, until you see a receiver running down the field that goes like that and then runs down the field past you, the ball's coming, turn around and knock it down. Right.
And, right. The other technique too, though, is if you know that the depending on what the route where the wide receiver is, and you can keep an eye on him, then you can use the sideline as your friend.
Right.
So you can slowly, even without touching him, you can literally guide him to the sideline. Therefore, that gives you more room and more space. So he won't run by you, but it gives you more room to play the ball.
Well,
See, and I've never really played cornerback, but I know that basically by knowing how you're supposed to play cornerback.
Well, I played monster back, and my job was getting run over by the 3 pulling guards and the tight end that ran over my head, and hopefully somebody could come and make the tackle after I was laying on the ground. Maybe I slowed somebody up and they tripped over me, so that's about as good as I was. But now this carries over into a lot of different things. So we're going to kind of shift to the hoop side of things and the talents that are out there. But the idea that I have is the same thing. Man-to-man means man-to-man. Zone means zone. A lot of times what we're seeing are man with zone principles, which that sounds good in theory, but it means that you're relying on help. Now, we all know from playing basketball that you do rely on help. I get that. I don't have a problem with that at all. But if you're lined up on somebody on an island as a corner, that's your man. Yeah. And whatever principle you're talking about, I got help over top, I got this and that, and I got the linebacker dropping it. I think we're seeing too much of that. If we're getting beat man on man, because you see a guy get beat deeper on a short or a mid-range crossing route, something like that, he's immediately looking around to see who's supposed to help or looking for a flag, one of the two. But who's supposed to be there? Who's guard your man? And if you get beat man on man, you get beat man on man. That's what you're talking about.
Right. I mean, I agree with that, but I think part of it too, if you're going to run the zone, then you have to practice the zone.
Right.
So therefore, it's true execution. I think a lot of times, guys, they're not that good because or they might falter because of the factor that people are not anticipating and they're not working together.
Right.
Even to a point that even if you scream it out or let somebody know the point, here's something coming. I mean, that's like playing zone in basketball.
Right.
You got to let somebody know, even if it's help, or whatever it may be. It might be a little bit obscure from football. But here's my point. If you practice the drills and you practice what you're doing, I think it makes it easier for you to make those plays.
Right.
I think oftentimes they go, well, you're out here on the island, you're playing man, but somebody could come over. But you got to practice that. The more they practice, the better they can be. And I think that's just a lot of time lack of execution is because they don't practice or somebody's being lazy.
Well, from playing basketball, when you hear behind you, I got your help, I got your help, I got your help. You're going, that's great. That's the last resort.
Yeah.
The guy I got the guy. If I don't have the guy, I deserve to get beat.
Right. But I guess my other point though too, if you're going to play that scheme,
right?
Okay, you have to be able to recognize it. See, it's the reason why some people are decent at basketball. It's the reason why when you run a fast break or you're playing even football, some people are just aware, they understand the game. Some people have a lot of talent, they are very athletic, and they can make plays. But when you understand the game, you don't have to be so physically built. It's the same reason I don't want to get too far in it as to the quarterbacks, as to why Tom Brady's not the most athletic. Ben Roethlisberger is not the most athletic. But they have cannons, they can throw the ball, and they use what they have, their intelligence as quarterbacks to make up for what they lack athletically.
Well, it comes down, in team sports, it comes down to fundamentals, communication, and athletic ability. You watch the guy with the cannon in right field, and the ball's there, and he throws a one-hopper to third base, and the guy from first base moves up to second. Like, what happened? You missed the cutoff man. You didn't make the right play. You showed off your arm, that's all fine and good, but you allowed the winning run to move up to second base. Next guy comes up, gets a little boot single, the guy from second scores, game's over. Yeah,
fundamentals will never betray you.
Right.
And I think that's what's missing. You have a lot stronger, faster, and more athletic guys, but fundamentals in whatever sport that these kids are playing will never betray you. They always work, and it's the reason why Deion Sanders made a lot of money. You say, well, he didn't make a lot of tackles, but Deion Sanders was a cover, and he got rich because people were afraid to throw his way.
Right, and that's a story for another story we can get into in depth later, and I believe I want to talk about that. But it's the idea of you have to know your job and know what you're doing, and then you can move on. And the problem I have with, and again, I didn't really mean to get there, but how we do, we start riffing on stuff, we keep going. is that the problem of, and the NBA in particular, and let's go into that thing that we were going to go into as far as college basketball. The NBA looks to me like they're trying to sidestep college basketball because they're receiving, in my opinion, an inferior talent than what they used to get from the NCAA basketball because of the one and dones and the fact that they're not being shown or they're not learning how to play the game properly when they get to the NBA. I'm not saying NBA games are unwatchable, but they're a lot harder to watch than they used to be. Let's put it that way.